Hey Rebels, welcome back to my channel. My name is Masako Mutsuka. You guys are watching RWS, which is Randoms with Shades, and I, Moa, am Shades the Rebel. So today we're going to be making the pattern for this dress, top, and I'm very excited about this one. So let's get into the video. Hi, I'm Shades, and just like this title sequence that you're watching over here, nothing has order because it's random. Okay guys, so we're going to start by tracing out our block. This is a close fitting dress block. It's a basic block. And remember when I said in my previous videos that a basic block doesn't have any kind of design. It's just simple and then you have to play around with the designs. So us tracing is going to be helpful for the fact that we're going to start shaping or designing this block. I make sense, right? Okay, so I have traced out the block and I've also marked all the points that are on the block. So as you guys can see, this block does seem like it's a bit big, but trust me, it's not big. This is a size 34 of the fashion size measurement. So size 34 is like the standard measurement in fashion industry, and it's actually quite small. If you think 34 is big, it's actually quite small in the industry. So this is like a model size 34, which could be about a 32 in retail or 28. So I've added some length on my block because I felt it was a bit too short, and remember my technical drawing was a bit longer and it was over my hip line, so that's why I've added. So I forgot to add in my bust point. So the bust point is basically the apex, or the nipple, if I may say. So all the dots that are on this block, which is the diamond shape and the triangular shape, those are the suppression dots that pretty much shape your body. So this is a basic block, but it's very close fitting. So if you were to make this block as it is into an exact dress just by adding seam allowance, you would get a tight fitting dress. Also, this is a block for a woven fabric. So I've added about 4 centimeters to the side to get that angled shape that we have on my technical drawing. So to get that A-line shape, you can add anything between 1 and 4 centimeters. Once you go any bigger, you might as well just make your dress a circle design. So I did join the lines of the dots to the bust point, which is something that I didn't mention. And this is because I am going to be closing the dot on the shoulder, meaning that that dot will not be existent on the shoulder anymore. So that's what I mean by closing the dot. And then I'll also be opening that dot because there's already extra space. It's going to be opening up at the waist suppression dot, but this will all make sense when I start doing it. And basically that line that I drew at the waist suppression dot, which is the diamond dot, it's because I want to flare it up, since I think that it might be too closed up. The A-line shape wasn't too, wide enough for me, so that's why. I'm also writing down the instructions that this pattern is going to be cut on fold. So it's not a full pattern, but a half pattern. So here I've already cut out my pattern without any seam allowance, and I'm just cutting all those dot lines through to the bust point and making sure that my pattern is still intact so that I can swing it as I did. And then I'm closing my dot at the shoulder, as you guys can see there. And the waist suppression dot has already opened up, and that is the shape for my top. I've also shaped my neckline by pretty much deducting 3 centimeters, making my curve parallel to the existing. Now I'm doing the same thing at the back, but remember that my back is a lot more different, so there are some changes. The back dot also does have a shoulder dot as well as a waist suppression dot, but these dots are a lot smaller than the ones in front because there isn't much curve on your back. And here we don't have a bust point where we can swing our dot. So what I am doing is to remove that shoulder dot. I'm just measuring the same amount of the dot, the width of the dot, and just moving it over to the edge of the shoulder, which is by the armhole. And then that's how I took it out. And right here at the back, I won't be flaring anything, but I did add that 4 centimeter to get that A-line look. And then I'm shaping it according to the technical drawing, which was that open back and that V neckline at the back, as well as that opening that was angled. I'm also measuring 8 centimeters just at that point where I'm going to add my bow straps. And with this pattern, it was really simple. There was no need for me to flare or anything like that. So once I'm done shaping it, all I do is just add my seam allowance, and I'm using a highlighter to do this. I literally thought it would be visible, but clearly not. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter all around, and at the bottom it is 2 centimeters because I was going to do a double turn hem. And bear in mind that at this point, as I'm cutting out, I had forgotten to add that length at the bottom, but we will fix that. So the next thing that I'm doing is drawing my bow straps. I literally didn't know how to go about this one. It was a trial and error, which actually turned out well. My straps were 50 centimeters long. The wider part of my strap was 10 centimeters wide, and then the smaller part was about 2 centimeters wide. So as you can see, it does have kind of a curve at the top and it's a bit straight at the bottom. I really thought that was, the way to go with this, and it also turned out well. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just adding some seam allowance all around. And my seam allowance was 1 centimeters. And then I cut it out. The paper that I'm using is just normal white A4 paper. I had to glue it together. I don't have any pattern paper. It finished, and so yeah, I used this paper. So after doing that, I just checked if it would look cute. So back to the front pattern. Okay, so now for our neckline, I will have a facing because I want a clean finish. So my facing is 5 centimeters wide, and it's basically gonna go on the inside of the garment. And a neckline, I mean, a facing does not have any seam allowance at the bottom because that's where you are going to overlock it. So just make sure that it has seam allowance on the shoulders as well as a neckline. This as well was going to be cut on fold. So remember that my technical drawing does not have a shoulder seam. Instead, the shoulder seam has been extended. I mean, from the back has been extended, so the shoulder seam is pretty much dropped. And so I cut out the front and stick it to the back, the front shoulder and stick it to the back to extend my back shoulder. And then after this, I add some seam allowance and make sure that it is going to fit the pattern in front, which was 10 centimeters wide in total. Basically, my shoulder was 8 centimeters wide, so I just had to make sure that the measurements were correct. And so I've added. And then also my shoulder does have a gathering, and so I had to cut out another line to slash and spread to get that gathering area. So all of this that I'm doing here is happening on my shoulder if you're not clear of what is going on. But I think once you see the pattern fully done, you'll be able to understand. So as I am spreading my pattern piece, it was also a trial and error. I didn't use any measurements. I just spread it until it looked okay. And remember that the gathering wasn't that much, so we don't want it to gather that much, just as an effect, just a design element. So yeah, and the same thing, I shape it and then cut it out. And remember that my front pattern didn't have a seam allowance, and this was a big mistake. You want to add your seam allowance, but I was lazy to add my seam allowance, and I just added the seam allowance on the fabric as I was cutting. The next thing, I'm also going to be doing a facing for the back neckline. I'm going to be doing the same thing here as well. Just trace out my back and then just add 6 centimeters because on my back it was, or I had already added my seam allowance. So usually a facing is about 5 centimeters wide. You can go bigger or smaller. It really is your choice. But I think 5 centimeter is the professional one. And then those corners, I go in and round them out because that's the area that we're going to overlock. And you can't overlock a corner that is continuous on an overlocking machine. Instead, you have to just round it out and then you'll get a nice smooth overlocking. I hope you guys understand me. So if you had to overlock a corner that wasn't continuous, you would be able to. I think we'll speak about that later as we go in. So now I'm just writing down all the information as to how many pieces I'm cutting, where should I add seam allowance so that I don't forget. All these instructions are very important, especially for a pattern maker as well as your machinist or your cutter, the person who's going to be cutting the fabric. I also write down the exact measurements of how much seam allowance I must add on my front. And then I also match up my sizes to see if they are equal in size, in length, sorry. And this is where I said, guys, I forgot. And so do not panic because we're able to add. And this is why you have to check your patterns as you go. So I added the needed length and everything was a-okay. So this is how my patterns look like. I will show you guys how to make the sleeve pattern tomorrow when we sew. Thank you so much for watching my channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Until tomorrow, Thursday, see you guys at 8 a.m. Bye.